as we receive a briefing in regards to skimmers which are affecting our entire community and state. Opening comments will be provided by Sheriff Demings, followed by Commissioner Putnam of the Department of Agriculture. Sheriff Demings.
Okay. Thank you, Captain Nieves, and thank you to all of you for being here this morning. I am joined by Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services Commissioner Adam Putnam and Orlando Deputy Police Chief Orlando Rolon, and also Chief Lynn Kramer with the Department of Agriculture as well. We want to create awareness and provide information about the ever-present danger of skimmers since they continue to be a source of fraud across the entire state of Florida. Skimmers are devices that are surreptitiously placed on gas pumps or ATM machines to collect our personal credit card information and debit card information for later fraudulent use. The skimmer steals the data when consumers swipe their cards for payment. Credit card crimes hurt all of us with increased fees, loss of savings, and fraudulent transactions which may take time to investigate. By alerting consumers, we can minimize the risk associated with the convenience of using digital technology. Consumers who suspect a skimmer has been placed on a pump or financial device should contact law enforcement by calling the non-emergency numbers of the respective law enforcement agencies. Law enforcement agencies partner with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services to protect consumers from these type of financial crimes. Commissioner Putnam will provide additional information on this important issue. Before I go to Commissioner Putnam, in terms of the unincorporated area of Orange County here, within the last 18 months, we have located 19 different skimmers between gas pumps and ATMs in the area. Within the last 7 days, we have located 2 such skimmers on ATM devices. They typically are in the tourism corridor, and so we pay particular attention to those areas. And we've been very proactive in assigning our deputy sheriffs to respond to those locations and on a regular basis check the different ATM machines, et cetera, trying to locate these devices. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Putnam, who will talk about the overall landscape for the entire state of Florida. Commissioner Adam Putnam.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you very much, Sheriff and Deputy Chief Rolon with Orlando Police Department. This is a partnership across all agencies and with the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services to protect Floridians and protect those who work hard and save their money to be able to visit our state. And certainly Central Florida is the premier destination for tourists, and all of us are working hard to protect our visitors and our residents' identities and their pockets. Beginning around 2015, our inspectors at fuel stations, at gas stations, really began to detect a growing number of these skimmers that we had previously seen on ATM machines. We began to find them on gas pumps. And since that time, we have seen a steady trend upward, an increase in the number of skimmers being found around the state on these gas pumps. We believe that on average, each victim of being skimmed is losing approximately $1,000, and that skimmer at a busy gas station is collecting the information of dozens of customers per day for the period of days that skimmer is there. We responded with legislation that increased the penalties for engaging in this type of criminal activity because the law had not kept up with the crime. So it raised the penalty and made it easier for prosecutors to make the case. We came back again this year to add additional penalties for the possession of the skimming equipment. In other words, if one of Sheriff Demings or Chief Rolon's folks had found someone who had a box full of this equipment on their front seat that they had not yet attached to the gas pump or that they had recently removed from the gas pump, they would still be in violation of the law, for there is no positive use of that equipment but to steal from people. And so those two pieces of legislation have moved forward. We still continue to see an increase in the number of skimming devices that we are finding around the state. For example, this year alone, in the first 7 months of this year, we have found nearly 300 skimming devices, which is more than the number that we detected all of last year. So we remain committed to developing the partnerships across law enforcement agencies, but we are also asking the public for their support. And there are some very simple things that the traveling public can do during this summer traveling season to protect themselves. When you approach a gas station, we recommend that you use, cash is best, and if you're paying with a card, credit cards are better than debit cards because it allows the consumer an additional layer of protection. We recommend that customers who are filling up look for the security devices on the pump that are now required by the new law that we passed to be in place on that pump. This includes the cabinet being locked. You should not see that cabinet ajar below the pump where you flip on the selection of fuel that you're picking. You should see the security tape intact. If that security tape is broken, do not use that pump. The filling stations are now upgrading to different locking mechanisms, and the newest ones have automatic shutoff valves so that that pump cannot be used if someone has entered it without entering the appropriate code. So there are newer technologies coming along that allow the public additional layers of protection. In the meantime, the public is recommended to use the pumps that are most in direct line of sight with the person working inside. The skimmers tend to be found on the outlying pumps, not in the center section of the gas station that are the most highly trafficked and have the direct line of sight inside to the employees who are working there. We're working with the Petroleum Marketers Association to train their staff so that they're checking those pumps on a regular basis and looking for any signs of interference. Unfortunately, like many forms of criminal activity, the bad guys continue to evolve just as the laws continue to evolve. We now see technologies that allow them to download these using Bluetooth. The next wave of technology allows them to call into their skimming device and download it without returning to the scene of the crime. And we will continue to adapt and work with the Retail Association, the petroleum marketers, and law enforcement to make sure that the laws stay up to speed with the bad guys. But simple things that the customers can do in terms of selecting the pump that's within the line of sight, using a credit card instead of a debit card, protecting your numbers at the ATM when you're typing in your access code number to protect it from cameras that may have been installed there. These are the things that we want the traveling public to be educated about. Floridians and tourists, both in Florida and across the country, this is not a crime limited to Florida, but unfortunately it is a crime that we are seeing growth in and an increasing number of these devices being found. We thank you for your assistance in helping us to get the word out, and we're open for questions. Thank you.
Do they still, your credit card will have the chip in it. Is that required? You know how you'll go to the supermarket and stuff, and they'll require you not to swipe the card but use the chip? Are we seeing that at gas stations? Like as far as the chips go, like they're not requiring the chips.
Yeah, what I'm going to do, Sergeant Rob Bill is here and Chief Kramer. They kind of work the investigative enforcement arm of this on a daily basis. So Sergeant Bill, Rob Bill from the Orange County Sheriff's Office probably will be a good person to respond to that.
Thank you, Sheriff. Just so I understand your question, you're wanting to know if the gas stations are moving towards chip technology. Well, I can't speak for that whole industry, but generally we still see that they are using the swipe technology, which obviously is the older technology. We would prefer people use the chips. It is easier to compromise the cards with the swiping technology. In fact, you still see some of the retailers using swipe technology or disabling the chip technology for whatever various reasons. We are aware that Florida, because we are targeted because of our tourist industry, a lot of our retailers are embracing that technology, and it's becoming more difficult for criminals to come into Florida and use that technology, and it is driving them out of the state to a certain extent in terms of using those cards fraudulently.
So they're not required by law to use the chip?
To my knowledge, they're not required as of yet. Now, that may eventually change. That may be more of a question, a congressional question nationally.
As far as the checking of the pumps, I know that the commissioner indicated that the staff is encouraged to check the pumps frequently. It almost seems like there need to be a standard that they need to be checked a couple of times a day. Is there any actual requirement for the providers to check those systems and make sure the security's not been compromised?
There are training protocols that the petroleum marketers have adopted that include more frequent checks of those. That is a successful tactic. It certainly allows someone who has a trained eye to identify whether there's been a breach. It is a more successful tactic with a larger gas station that has multiple employees. So you can imagine the larger, newer stations that have multiple employees who could free someone up. That's more difficult with someone who may be a mom and pop ownership and there's only one person working the cashier and they don't have the ability to do that. So it is not in the law that they must do that, but it is a widely adopted practice that we are seeing because the owners of these stations are also suffering economically. So it is also in their best interest to do these things.
We used to always be told to look for the thing that might not look like it's secure on the front of it, like there's a false front and all of that. But I know personally, when my credit card got hacked and it was used at 7 gas stations at the exact same time of day in South Orange and North Osceola County, I was told that it was compromised at a gas station and the device was on the inside. Is that where the tape comes in?
Yes, almost all the devices that we're finding are their internal skimming devices. So the citizens will not see these devices. The best thing for them to look for is make sure the security tape is still on the gas pumps and the doors are secure on the pumps.
So the days of having kind of the awkward looking thing that's on the outside, like a science project, it's sophisticated enough now. And there was a mention of having to, if that pump is open, that the person has to have a proper code. Is that another level of security for the consumer?
Yeah, a lot of the newer stations have a device set up within the pump. If the door is opened, the pump is shut down, and the only way to reactivate it is inside the store.
Okay, but some of the older stations doesn't have that technology.
Yeah, they don't have that technology.
I mean, I guess I hate to say this out loud, but it sounds like you're saying that you should go to the newer gas stations because you got a higher level of security.
Well, they can't. I mean, we're at this point we're dealing with a smaller percentage of the gas stations having that new technology, but I think as these store owners are victimized, they will upgrade their security on these pumps.
Currently, the security on the pumps right now, until the technology catches up, it's kind of like a tractor. All the keys are universal among all the stations. So will there be any discussion of enhanced penalties for possession of one of those keys?
Commissioner Putnam?
What we've discussed are multiple generations of technology. The most recent technology of security on the pumps being that if someone forces their way into that pump cabinet, there's an override switch that does not allow for the dispensing of fuel. That's the latest and greatest. Most stations are now beyond the days of the universal key. So when we first started talking about this problem in 2015, it was very common for there to be a universal access key to those pumps. We are substantially past that, and that would now be the minority of stations. and so most of them now are independently keyed. And the next generation of technology that is yet to be widely adopted, but has been adopted by the newest stations, is the one with the access code that actually shuts down the fuel pump until someone from the inside comes out and checks it to make sure that it hasn't been tampered with.
That tape that goes over that door, how often is a state inspector looking at that pump and then reapplying that tape? I mean, I guess, how often is that security checked and double checked to make sure before I throw my credit card in there that it's been secured?
So let me be distinguished between the roles here. The station operator, who also is a victim in these crimes, maintains that security tape. The state inspectors are inspecting the quality of that fuel and making sure that you're not being ripped off on the quantity and the octane of the fuel that you're purchasing. So that's an important distinction. The reason why the public is such a powerful part of this is that there are way more customers filling up their vehicles with access to Twitter and Facebook than we have inspectors working for the state. And so much of this tends to be, in addition to our daily activities, moving around the state inspecting stations as part of a regular schedule, we will respond to customer complaints and concerns. They should let the station owner know, and they can use the 1-800 number that is on the sticker on the pump to inform the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services that that station and that pump need to be looked at. So if you see that broken security tape, don't fill up your car there. Inform the station manager and call the phone number that is on the Department of Agriculture sticker on that pump.
Does that station owner have to have a log as far as when they do complete these checks?
We don't require them to keep a log, but it's in their best interest to do those checks because they are victims just as the customer is.
Do you think that in the future that may be a necessity?
Off the top of my head, that additional paperwork is not something that I believe is going to necessarily make the public more secure. I think that there are better uses of their time and the public policy than checking logbooks. I'd rather be spending our inspectors' time checking pumps than checking logbooks.
Okay, we're going to conclude the press at this point, but the key takeaways here is three things. One, law enforcement is going to be very vigilant, but we do need the consumer themselves to be active participants. You heard us talk about the see something, say something. Well, once again, if they see something at any of these locations that does not look quite right, then we're asking that they notify law enforcement and or the petroleum operators. And that's the third point I wanted to make, is that we're only going to be successful if the petroleum operators and the other businesses that have ATMs are proactive in their efforts to help protect our consumers. So thank you all for being here today.
Just a